Okay, hello everybody. Just want to preface this video by saying that you'll see there on the left I have already made the original first bark. So now you will be watching me make a second bark. The disadvantage of this is obviously that I am already working with certain pieces that I've carried over from the first bark, mainly the wheels, which have been set up to the correct rear wheel size, and they are also the correct distance apart. This allows me to get the general shape of the bark right. From here, you need to work with your three major shape categories. You've got your major shape, which is your silhouette, which includes your entire shape, your wheels, everything. Then you've got your minor shapes, which are things like your fairings, which I'm busy with now. And then you've got your minor details, your smaller details, things like foot pedals, handles, gear levers, stuff like that, that fills out and finishes the design. So at the moment, I'm just trying to get a shape going for the front fairing. You can see I'm using hard ops to do that. And you'll see I just kind of fiddle. I mean, there's nothing really definitive there right now. It just looks like a weird square with some pieces cut out of it. But as you see, as we go forward and a little bit further and further, you'll see that it starts to take a bit more shape. So as a tool, I really can't recommend hard ops and box cutter enough. It really is fantastic. It speeds up your workflow so much. And all it's really doing is basically allowing the bull tool to function at max speed. You can create shapes really quickly and cut or weld or divide really simply and quickly. You can see here at the moment I'm just dividing to try and get a visor. So during the course of this video I might speed it up at times and then slow it down at times just to give a bit of a voiceover again, but I'll speed it up just so that you don't have to watch through about 2 hours that I spent modeling this bike. So you can see here now that box cutter is far from a perfect tool. You can see that we do end up with poor geometry quite often. I do work destructively, so I apply my cuts the whole time. I just find it easier than ending up with a bunch of invisible boxes all over the place. But as a result, I do need to go in and fix my geometry quite a lot, and that normally just involves bringing your points together. So you can see that my shading in my viewport looks a little bit different, and that's just because I've got cavity and shadow turned on, and I find that that gives you a more realistic view of what your shapes will look like once you get to cycles or once you get to EV where you have actual lighting. It gives you a sense of light while you're still at the modeling phase, which is fantastic. Okay, so you can see I just zoom out here for a second just to get a more holistic view of my bike. And then once I'm happy with a major shape, I'll generally go in and make several smaller shapes out of that major shape just to create a little bit more interest or to create a little bit more surface variety and break it down a bit into smaller details. Okay, so a lot of people probably disagree with the fact that I work destructively, but it is something that just works for me. But most people would probably say you shouldn't. You'll see I make a lot of quick and easy decisions on what I'm doing and finalize them straight away, which when you're working with your own design is obviously a lot easier than when you work into a specific reference. So I do have a bunch of reference open at the moment, but I am working to my own imagination and taking this bike to where I want it to be so I can make the decisions on the fly as I'm doing it. Okay, so what you're seeing now is that I actually work pretty much the opposite to how most car modelers would work, in that I create solid shapes and then delete away the geometry that I don't need, and then use a solidify modifier to bring back the edge. So normally if you follow a card tutorial or something, they'll show you that you model with a plane and then you add your edges in, whereas I model with solid shapes, delete out the geometry I don't need, and then add my edges in with a solidify modifier. Um, Again, just personal preference. So you'll see I'll come in again here, delete out everything I don't need because your fairing doesn't have those bits. We delete that away, and then we can just use the solidify modifier to give that piece a bit of thickness. Okay, so something you'll just see me do here quickly is that if you select these end vertices and you normally can slide them in by pressing GG, if you press C, you can then slide them outwards, which is really handy in creating new different shapes. Okay, so here you can see that I would actually describe my process quite a lot like sculpting or subtractive sculpting, in that I add large shapes and then I take away from those shapes to create the shapes that I actually want, interesting shapes. So again, I'm just bringing in a cube, giving it a bit of a difference. I'm going to mirror it in a second, and then I'll subtract that away from my original cube, which I had made to fit the rest of the bark. So as you can see, I'm just moving the bike around the whole time, zooming out, getting a look and a feel of how the whole thing looks from a distance holistically as a shape. So you can see I use a lot of basic shapes and just kind of move them around and edit and play. And here I'm trying to cross cut a cylinder with another cylinder, which pretty much never works. It's always a pain. You've always got a lot of cleanup to try and do afterwards. And even then, it doesn't look great. Here I'm adding more geometry in with the knife tool just to try and get it to look a little bit smoother. I think eventually I'll decide that I'm happy enough, although it's still not perfect. So here again, you can see that it's just a case of adding and subtracting. You know, you add in the cylinder and then we subtract out a little element of detail. Okay, so here you can see that things don't always work the way you want them to. And sometimes there is a little bit of trial and error. And eventually I decide to use a knife project to get the shape that I wanted. Again, just cleaning up some geometry. This is always my favorite part on stuff like this. Like using a lot of bevels and insets and extrudes on your cylinders can give a lot of interest. So the biggest trick here is that there is no trick. There is no crazy modeling technique. There is no magic bullet. It's purely about detail, how much time you're willing to spend on the model, how much time you're willing to sit there and fiddle with vertices, and just keep pushing your model and adding and adding and adding to get something that is really representative of what you have in your mind, instead of, a lot of people spend 5 minutes and they want to know, well, why does my model not look like someone else's model? Okay, so you can see here that it's not all just add-ons and fun and games with box cutter. We do also do some normal box modeling and podly modeling. And then once I've got a shape like that, I'll normally come in with box cutter afterwards and cut out a little bit of details. So box cutter's got some cool things like this radial array that makes things really easy to get shapes like that. Again, it's just about adding details, and you see there I added a detail and it wasn't working, so I took it away again. Instead used the old knife project. And again, just another little cut there, so a little bit of extra detail. And here you can just see as well that it's about creating details that would actually look like they would work in the real world. So here again, you can just see that it's a combination of your traditional modeling, and then I bring in other cubes and use hard ops to join them in there. Okay, so this hasn't been my normal way of doing a tutorial or a video. I just recorded myself working as I would normally work, and I've done this voiceover at a later time. If there's anything that I've missed or that you didn't understand or that you'd like me to cover in more detail, please let me know and I will do so. But otherwise, I hope you're able to get something out of this video to understand that it really is just basic techniques, but it's more about understanding how shapes work, how volumes work, and how everything goes together to make an aesthetically pleasing design.